We begin our report with a turncoat in court in Donald Trump's criminal trial. Trump's former attorney and fixer, Michael Cohen, who once carried out Trump's most sensitive tasks, testified that he paid adult film actress Stormy Daniels $130,000, quote, at the direction and for the benefit of Mr. Trump. The money was an effort to keep Daniels from selling her story about her alleged sexual encounter with the former president in 2006. Cohen claims Trump told him that the story would have been a, quote, total disaster for his 2016 presidential campaign, particularly with women voters. The former president listened to Cohen's testimony, mostly with his eyes closed, with some friends by his side, Alabama Senator Tommy Tuberville and Ohio Senator J.D. Vance, who is reportedly on the short list to be Trump's vice presidential pick. They were in court. Former GOP presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy is expected to join Tuesday as the prosecution continues its direct examination of Cohen. Trump spoke briefly to the press about a former prosecutor and writer from the conservative National Review after court adjourned for the day.
Andy McCarthy, great legal analyst, said none of this is illegal. There's nothing illegal. It's called politics. There's nothing illegal. Look, they're doing great. You know why they're doing great? They've kept me here for 3.5, 4 weeks instead of campaigning.
The prosecution alleges it's the falsification of business records that is not merely political. The former president has pleaded not guilty to more than 30 such charges in this case. He has also repeatedly denied an alleged affair with Stormy Daniels. For more on this, we are lucky to be joined by CBS News legal analyst Rikki Klieman. Okay, Rikki, you were in the actual courtroom, which is a thing. So what struck you about being in that room?
A number of things struck me, John. Number one is that Judge Merchan runs such a tight courtroom with real discipline that you could hear a pin drop in that courtroom. Everyone really adheres to his rules. Number two, Donald Trump, when he strides down the center aisle on his way to and from his seat, I think people are taken with the fact, if they have not seen him in person before, how tall he is and how his presence commands that center aisle. Number three, and perhaps much more relevant to the trial, is that the configuration of the furniture in that trial does not really allow the witness to look directly at Donald Trump, nor does it allow Donald Trump to look directly at the witness. And I found that disconcerting as a trial lawyer, because the witness has to sometimes get up and go around to be able to find Donald Trump in the courtroom. And that means his point, the defendant's point of where he is gazing, is not being able to see the witness's expressions. All that, be that as it may, we need to look at the substance of the testimony in that courtroom today.
Yes, but as someone who's been in those courtrooms, those little things can matter. So it's great to have your perspective. Okay, before we get to Michael Cohen's mountainous credibility issues, let's talk with his piece of the puzzle and why it's important in the step-by-step process prosecutors are trying to go through.
In order for the prosecutors to prove their case, they have to show that these 34 business records were falsified with the knowledge and intent of Donald J. Trump. It is one thing that there is plenty of evidence around Donald Trump. It's another thing that someone has to say that he said something, that he did something that puts him right in the middle of it. And the only person who can do that, who is able to testify, is, in fact, Michael Cohen. There is no other witness that can put him right in the middle of the business records.
And you say, in fact, it's Michael Cohen. Michael Cohen has a lot of difficulty with facts in his life. He lied on Donald Trump's behalf when he worked for him. He went to jail because he lied. So what have the prosecutors done to shine up this troublesome witness?
Well, the prosecution has been very, very smart in what they've done to corroborate the testimony of Michael Cohen before he testified. Right. So for weeks now, we have heard other witnesses who give us the facts, the dates, the texts, the voicemails, so that by the time Michael Cohen comes up to testify, that he is really filling in blanks that have already been opened up by other people. One of the things that struck me about the prosecutor's organization today, she is about as thorough as I've seen, is that she goes chronologically, text by text, email by email, voicemail by voicemail. And what you get is a story that really you can't pick apart. However, it still doesn't put, as I would say, Donald Trump in the middle of the soup for the purpose of a conviction yet. So when you get to the final 10 minutes of today, that's the conversation where Michael Cohen really tells the jury that Donald Trump is directing him and directing his CFO, Alan Weisselberg, to have this scheme where the records would be falsified to say they are in payment for legal services when rather they were a reimbursement, according to Cohen, for paying off Stormy Daniels, as well as some other things that he did. So that's where the defense has to go, is to that last 15 minutes of today and say, well, where's the corroboration for this?
Right. So just let me see if I can recapitulate what you've said and tag on the final question. The reason they go through having Cohen acknowledge all those texts and emails and so forth is to make him seem credible. In other words, what's coming out of his mouth, here we have on paper. And then that final bit you're talking about is the knowledge and intent, the key thing. What will the defense, are there holes in that they can poke?
Well, they have to go to why did Michael Cohen make up this story if he didn't make up the other stories? And they have an opening if they can get into it. And I'm just talking about this not with an opinion of what is right and what is wrong, but only about trial tactics. That in trial tactics, what the defense has to do is say, look at the animus he had. He was embarrassed. He was shortchanged on his bonus at the end of 2016. He was then not paid back for the money he says that he put out for Stormy Daniels. And worse than that, he didn't get the job that he was looking for in Washington. And he was embarrassed. He told his daughter he was going to be special counsel. He went on Sean Hannity and talked about it. He wanted to be chief of staff. And so all of this disappointment, he admits his disappointment, he admits his anger, and that was good for the prosecution, but it's still a vulnerable point. Whether that gets you to a hung jury or let alone an acquittal is a whole other question.
Not just that he's a known liar, but that he has a grudge.
Yes, and a big one.
Rikki Klieman, thank you.